A Science of Change, podcasting by Gilmore Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. All right, welcome to another podcast with Gil Crosby, and today my guest is an old friend, a dear friend who lives in Tel Aviv, and he's an OD practitioner, much like the podcast I did a couple weeks ago with a Ukrainian social scientist. My friend is now living in an active war zone, and so that has become part of my interest in today's podcast with Allon Shevat. Allon, how are you?
Sir, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Did I pronounce your last name somewhat closely to correct?
You're closer, 100%. Bullseye.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked you ahead of time because I would have screwed it up completely. So, look, I just want you to have a chance to, there's two things here. One is life in your current experience of life with this war going on. I don't know if you know, but Kurt Lewin's first paper, he wrote it after being in the Prussian army during World War I, and was the experience of being a soldier helped him reflect on the social construction of reality, that his experience of life as a civilian, when he just looked at objects like a house and so on, were so different than the way he viewed things as a soldier in a war zone. Suddenly the house was shelter and, potential supplies and part of his property, in a sense, fair game. Whereas prior to that, it had been, of course, somebody else's house, and maybe they had a life there. And, the way one perceives reality was altered dramatically. And then he applied that to all kinds of group dynamics and so on for the rest of his life. But it started with his wartime experience. So, if you're willing, talk a little bit about your wartime experience. What are you noticing? What's life like for you now?
Well, I want to compare 1973, the Yom Kippur War, when I was an officer in the Israeli army, and now that I'm a 73-year-old organizational consultant who is no longer in the army and living a civilian life. So I won't elaborate on what it was like in 73, but I would concur that everything is seen different from the eyes of a soldier. I was just thinking of what you were saying. If I see a house, I would say, well, is the person in there on my team or on the other team? Okay.
Right. Potential threat.
Yeah. Can I hide there? Should I run away? Should I blow it up? What should I do? Now, we're heading now into the fourth week of this war. And I have made every effort that I can to normalize my life in a very difficult reality. Okay. The reality is that I know someone who was beheaded, and I know 4 people with whom I worked who were killed. Okay. Wow. I have my son is now in America, but my daughter and granddaughters live close to me, and I hear sirens going on all day. So there's four steps when the siren goes off. The siren goes off, we hear the Iron Dome, it hits the missile, and then debris falls. So that's that's the routine. And in that routine, you have to I had to make some decisions. Do I follow every instruction that I've been given? Do I run to a shelter? Do I go swimming? Do I live my life? Do I continue work? And at first, just like in Corona, everyone was covering their mouth and washing everything 100 times. And eventually, I think you can not get used to it, but you can adapt. You can
Sure.
adapt. I don't know if you can adapt. I can adapt. Right?
That's what the Ukrainian said, that,
Yeah.
when she first heard explosions in Odessa, she was scared to death. And now she's just, in a way, doesn't even pay any attention to them.
No, the noise of the siren is horrendous and it's
Mm-hmm.
frightening. The explosions, you learn how far is that from me? Now,
Right.
the closest this is, I live 70 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. Okay, about 40 miles, 40,
Mm-hmm.
50 miles from the
It's
Gaza
not
Strip.
far.
That's not far. And the missiles have been landing like 6 to 7 kilometers, we'll say 3 miles from my house.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not an intellectual exercise. Okay, this is real stuff. And
Right.
go ahead.
Well, you showed me a video. You sent a video to me of the bomb shelter in your basement,
Yeah.
in your apartment building. When was your apartment building built?
My apartment was built 20 years ago.
And at the time, they built that bomb shelter, I take it.
Every building has to have a bomb shelter.
Yeah, right. So just that is quite a difference.
Yeah, and also when you're walking in the street, there's public shelters everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't go to a shelter for several reasons. Number one is, look, I'm 73, right? So would I rather go all at once or get some, disease that eats away from me? Certainly, I'd rather die being blown up, right, than having a disease. That's
Okay.
number one, right? Number two is you can injure yourself, running down the stairs. I have to run down the
Sure.
stairs.
Sure.
Okay. And so I just, I it's just like a noisy plane going overhead. And that's not and that's not it's I think it's a tribute to how well we can adjust, and it's also a tribute to how much that we can be punished by events, right? I think there's another thing which is important to understand. I don't watch the news anymore
Hmm.
because you can't understand what's going on here if you don't understand how World War One ended. Okay, and when at the beginning, I used to watch. They bombed this, we bombed that. They killed this, they slaughtered this. It's like it's being updated on something you don't understand. If you don't understand the end of World War One, you can't understand what's going on now. And without any context, I don't like to be updated by a bunch of people who got their education on a smartphone. So I just turned off. I turned off the news because let me tell you something. The Middle East is very hard to understand, even if you know a little history. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you know a lot of history, it's impossible to understand. And certainly, if you watch TV, that's the last thing you're going to do is understand the Middle East. So,
Sure. It's easy just to do the taking sides and like the way the U.S. responded to 9/11. And
yeah. With like, if you look at it, there was a look at this area and call it an apartment. Okay, someone owned the apartment until 1917. That was the Turks. They owned it. World War One ended. They lost. They lost the building. They lost the ownership. The British bought the building, and they did what they wanted. That's the whole story.
mm-hmm.
That's the whole. If you don't understand that, you can't understand what's going on now. Everything is derivative of what happened in 1917. Okay.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because if you ask me what happened after when World War One ended, I immediately go to Kurt Lewin's writings about the failure of democracy in Germany. So it's a slightly different subject, but it certainly is related to the idea that democracy meant that anyone could say or do anything. And so people who were absolutely anti-democratic were given freedom that came from being a democracy and took over Germany. Uh, and so there's all kind of attack the press, attack the institutions like the educational institutions, attacked. There's lessons to be learned there. I think for the United States right now, where we have people who attack the press and attack the elite of the educational elite and so on.
In 1917, there was only one Democratic player in the whole game, and that was Great Britain. But they weren't acting as a democratic player; they were acting as an imperial power. As the
Sure.
Turks had fallen apart, there's no democracy in the Middle East at all. Okay,
Right.
and that was a game of imperialism which people don't play anymore. But it's interesting you're talking about Kurt Lewin because I just read Why Liberalism Failed by Denham, an
Mm-hmm.
interesting book on how the original concept of individualism has been diluted and is fed upon itself, weakening the very basics of the type of democracy that Lewin was talking about in that era of 1917, etc.
Right, because democracy to work in Lewin's mind, each citizen has to take responsibility.
Absolutely, and not it's just what smartphone do I buy, right? Or what Denham calls the freedom to buy, which is basically the only freedom you have left. Okay.
Yeah, that's the tension of capitalism in the midst of uh, democracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard; they blur.
Yeah. They certainly do, and especially when I know that Lewin and also Denham they talk about the whole idea of what's needed to govern yourself. It's not that everyone does what they want. That's not self government.
Right,
Okay.
that's correct. That's
That's,
right.
that is not self government. That is the dictatorship of the individual. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what liberalism is about, and it has been severely corrupted. Now, if we take that and put it in the Middle East conflict, well, we have no society is individualistic at all. Okay, which is very interesting. They're all
Mm-hmm.
um, group. They have groups have rights. Individuals have far less rights, and that's
Mm-hmm.
an interesting way of looking at how violent a society can become when only groups have rights.
Does that go all the way back to like the Persian Empire?
Well, I don't know anything about the Persian Empire.
Okay. Well, it was pretty
Um,
autocratic. Certainly, the
yeah,
individual didn't have rights.
yeah, and but that on the one hand, on the other hand, Hamas was voted in elections. Okay,
Right. Right.
uh, Mr. I think it was Clinton or Bush or I don't, but all the American president. Well, let's introduce democracy. They introduced
Mm-hmm.
democracy in several places. Let's look at the history of the introduction of democracy into the Middle East. The British set up in Iraq an independent, a constitutional monarchy in Iraq. That lasted very short time and led, of course, to Saddam Hussein and the generals taking over. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that didn't work. Then there were the elections in the Gaza Strip. The Hamas was elected. Well, that didn't turn out very well, did it? And then in Egypt, in elections, the Brotherhood was elected, the Muslim Brotherhood. I forgot the name of the previous president, oh, I can't remember. And he was kicked out. So
Right.
basically, there is no democracy in the Arab world, and in our world, within the 1967 borders, there is democracy, but in the conquered territories, there isn't. So
Right.
democracy is very, very rare in the Middle East. The only two places that are democracy in the Middle East are 1967 bordered Israel and Tunisia. Everyone else lives in a dictatorship. And part of these dictatorships were elected, the same way that in Germany
That's
the
right.
presidents were elected.
It's not an automatic solution.
No, 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 certainly not.
It's not. And I believe that with the way I understand it, even we haven't always supported it when we should have, and sometimes we've imposed it when we shouldn't have. But Iran, their first elected president, I believe the CIA, got rid of him because they thought he leaned too far to the left.
Oh yeah. Well, look.
So,
If you look at what happened in Persia, uh,
uh-huh.
the CIA knocked out um, a democratically elected president because of his economic interests. Okay,
Yep. Right. Right.
and then of course they supported the Shah,
Yep.
and then there was Carter. I'm not a fan of Carter. Okay, who said, "Well, I've never been to a place as stable as Iran." And then he left, and the Shah was overthrown. Um, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole. Anyway, yeah. There's a lot to unravel there, and hopefully we'll keep figuring out how to do the best we can
Yeah.
in all our countries. But well, I mean, do you have anything else? Like you started by saying you were going to contrast 1973 when you were a soldier and with now. Uh, I think one thing that if the United States had any territory 40 miles from Gaza, everybody would own AR-15s. And so you would be sitting there in your apartment with a whole bunch of, with your own little arsenal. Do you have an arsenal?
No, no. Like I have very contradictory. Um, I live with a dilemma as far as Gaza is concerned because I served time in Gaza as a soldier.
Right.
The Americans and of course the British love to think, well, let's separate between Hamas and Gaza. That's ridiculous. They were elected and they're supported. Okay,
Right.
so the question is, what do you do? And the answer is, I think it's very clear what you do. Okay, you wage war to knock them back into the Middle Ages. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you have to do. Now, is that fair? No. Is it humanitarian? No. But I was on the list that both you and I are on, and someone asked me, what is the common, what are the shared values that both sides could meet on? Uh, Cecile asked me that, and my
Mm-hmm.
answer was the shared values is neither side wants to compromise, and they prefer dying when they're standing up. Okay, so it's us or them. Simple as that. Simple as that, and as un-American as you can make it.
I don't know. That's uh, we have that in our own land also without admitting it. So and similar dilemmas, except it's very different. But yeah, we've got similar dilemmas.
What
There
would
was the
America
Civil
do
War, you know.
what would America do if Vermont was being bombed from Montreal?
Right. We would, take out Montreal. I mean, we look at what we did to Iraq, and 19 of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, no, for no reason, right? Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Uh, Look, I hope that you guys succeed at doing what you have to do to create stability there from your perspective. And that's probably not the politically correct answer for some Americans, of course, but I mean, I wish there was a some way to create a stable living place for the people that are in Gaza. But first things are first, and I am really worried about your soldiers going in there because it's obviously a trap. So how do you dismantle it while you do the task of taking out the guys that did this stuff? It's
There's
not
another
easy.
issue here. If we link OD up to what we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to look at conflict models, okay, which exist in OD. There are many of them.
Sure.
And it's what do we do when two sides reject compromise
Mm-hmm.
and have mutually exclusive goals? Now, of course, there are theories that address that. Okay, there are theories that address that. It's not sit down and have a talk about it. If they,
Right.
if okay,
Collaboration isn't always the best thing? That would many OD people would, be shocked by the thought that you don't always try to collaborate or compromise.
Well, that's what happened until recently. What happened recently, from an Israeli perspective, is we withdrew from Gaza many years ago. They could have run their whole economy via Egypt. They have a shared border with Egypt. And we said, okay, live and let live. Let's manage the conflict at a low level of intensity. So the Qataris put money in there. We closed our eyes and blocked our nose, and they had a full autonomy. Okay, and we wanted to compromise. You say, okay, you want to destroy us? That's fine. But as long as you have a good level of standard of living, we'll compromise. We won't believe what you're telling you. And they were saying, no. We're not bombing you every day, but we want to kill and slaughter all of you. Okay, that was a compromise. Okay, and it didn't work.
It seems like it was a compromise that didn't have much chance of working, the way you're describing it, at least.
Yeah.
Allon, there's a conflict model that I use. I just, with my father, my brother, and others, and it says there's 5 basic styles of conflict. One, and the way we use it, the original creator, a guy named Jay Hall, believed that collaboration was always best. And so we use the instrument. We tell people that we think that's BS, that any one of these could be productive and any one of these could be destructive. And one is win-lose. You just go after your own goals and you don't worry about the other person's, what they want, and you don't worry about whether or not how they feel. You just go after it. And so I think that, we're a minority in that we say things like that can be the right thing to do at times. We're a minority in the OD community.
Look, I think that, and I've said this, you and I have had this discussion. I think that there's a cultural context to OD, and there are cultural conflicts to historical and cultural conflicts to cultural context to conflicts. And I think that a conflict has to take into account. Here's a major thing that I think we disagree on this, but what most conflicts in the Middle East have to do with recreating a better past. Okay? Not creating a better future. Everyone wants to create a better past. Okay? And that is why the present conflict is taking place. Let's go back and rewrite 1917, which is a critical year. And I think that in the West, there is a much better and much healthier model of let's build a better future. Few people who are managing the conflict on either side, they don't care about the future. We are stuck in 1917.
And even further back, right? Because of the attachment, the different, the same location, like 3 different religions all consider it holy.
Yeah, well, so all three consider it holy. 3 consider it holy. Well, 2 major ones, which is the in terms of numerically, which are Islam and the Jews. But Judaism got along very well without Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was always of very, very minor importance to Islam. The importance of Jerusalem is new. It's a tool in the conflict. Personally, I don't give a shit about Jerusalem, right? I don't care. I don't care. I'm not religious at all, but the whole conflict here has to do with let's look back and rewrite the history book. That's what it's about.
I don't disagree with anything you just said, so maybe I'm missing the part where I know we've disagreed on various things, like you talk about East and West and OD, and I tend to think that the whole East-West thing is Uh, well, a lot of people here in the U.S. right now, when they talk about what like diversity, take that and say it's West versus indigenous, and then they have an indigenous model, which includes the best indigenous model in their eyes of you can't own the land. Uh, we're all one with all the animals and things which I greatly admire. But they don't pay attention to the other indigenous cultures like the Incas, who brutally oppressed their neighbors so badly that when the Spaniards showed up, the neighbors were going, "Please kill these guys," and they helped them.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's interesting because I have a friend. With whom I correspond very frequently, and one of the questions we talk about is how is it that people voted Trump? How is it? Why did people do that? And when you look into the whole idea that everyone owns everything, and you can say, well, I'm male and I'm female. Oh, I'm a goat. Okay. And I can play on a different sports team despite my gender at birth, or I have to, like in Hebrew, like use masculine and feminine all the time. So a politician would say, I say masculine and I say feminine to all of you masculine, to all of you feminine, that we need masculine, we need feminine. When we deal with such absurdity, of course people are going to vote Trump. Of course they are. When we get dragged into this, I would call it dictatorship of the individual, dictatorship of weird ideas which ignore reality. Okay, and then someone comes along, talks like a bum. Okay, but what it says sounds like common sense. Of course, people fight for their territory. Anyone who says we shouldn't fight for their territory, they're where are you living? You know, of course, you have to understand. The question is not why people vote Trump. Let's look at the other side and understand how much stupidity there is on the other side. Then you can understand why there's stupidity on both sides and why no one is meeting in the middle.
right, we've lost the middle,
Yeah.
and we definitely have extremists on both sides. So
And that's
yeah,
a huge function of social media, a huge function of ignorance and social media. I want to say one other thing, and it has to do with
mhm.
OD as well. Okay, when someone goes to university now, they're a consumer. In other words, they come to the university and they say, well, this is what I want to study. So give me this and give me that, and I'll rank you and I'll rate you and I'll give you stars and I'll rate you if you're a good university or not. Okay? That is absolutely ridiculous. Okay? You can't go if you're going to want to be certified as an accountant or as a lawyer or learn history or learn about the Middle East. I want to learn about the Middle East conflict from the Israeli point of view or the Arab point of view. It's stupid. You have to go in, okay, and you have to let your individualism put it aside, and there need to be standards. There need to be some standards in OD as well. A lot of things pass as OD. Okay, a lot of things pass as OD. And it's also, well, I believe in ABC, I believe in cooperation, or I believe in whatever. But what are the standards of the profession? They're not clear enough. Everything goes. And if everything goes, you're going to see OD as a packaged product. You're going to see OD as something you can buy on the internet. Okay. And you can say, well, then you have, what do you call it? These uh, magicians. Oh, I'm an organizational architect. I'm going to speak to you guys for an hour and take $5,000, and you're going to be able to create a whole new world. Okay, no standards.
Well, I'm with you there, Alon, and this is what I love about you, actually. And I will say that a problem for me. I mean, I totally agree. There's no standards. I think most people in OD today, even the people in charge of some eminent journals, for instance, have a belief that they have to keep coming up with something new, and that the stuff that was done as long ago as 1946 doesn't matter. That somehow that's ancient. And so uh, they aren't willing to even try to understand application of OD theory from the past. But I wouldn't. I am one of the problems. Like when the OD network tried to establish standards, and some of the people that did work on that. I don't want them establishing standards for me. If anyone establishes standards for the OD profession, I want to be the one that does it.
Yeah, and at least if we don't establish what is OD, we should establish what isn't OD. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like when you have
you and I could do that. Maybe we should put some standards together, because those standards that came out of all that effort, it took them like years for one, and then when they had done it, there's no way. I mean, I've got their standard thing right here in my office. It's useless to me.
It's I know this guy, and he was a New Yorker. I forgot what his name is. Bill Gellerman tried to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. He tried to do that. We had a lot of disagreements, and then we met in New York once on a cold day, and within 2 hours, we reached a whole bunch of standards which were agreed on. I'll give an example. If you don't diagnose if you don't give a diagnosis, you can't do OD. You can't go in and do something. If there's no feedback to the system, it's not OD. If you're selling a product, it's not OD. Initially selling a product. Okay.
See, that's where I cause trouble, because I want the people in the system to do the diagnoses. So
as long as they're experienced, I don't want someone who doesn't know OD to do the diagnosis.
Okay, but Lewin went into groups of women that were mercantile operators, making fabric products, and had them establish like what their metrics were, what's the problems, what's in the way. I mean, he had a way of approaching them, but they came up with their own diagnoses of what was inhibiting their work and their own solutions. And that is how I function.
I'm going to take what you just said now and go back to the beginning of our conversation.
Okay.
When Israelis and Palestinians meet and discuss each other's perspectives, they become more intolerant of each other.
That's interesting. That's the opposite of what Lewin would say.
Yeah. So the more I understand what you're telling me, the more I detest you.
Well, that would only be true, I think, if you stayed. Man, that when people have been killing each other, it's harder to expect much from a conversation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's people hold grudges for much less.
Bet.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But anyway, I mean, that's the problem for me with OD standards is I haven't ever seen another person's OD standard that I would want to function by.
Never? Gil? Never?
Yeah. Well, Lewin didn't call what he did OD. I functioned by what I understand of his social science, but yeah, so far never.
I think it's important. I think your work is very important because you can never do OD if you don't understand where it comes from. You can't decide where it needs to go to. Okay, right. You and I, I think where we both have a common understanding is that you clearly understand probably better than anyone else today, okay, where it started. And I probably am one of the leaders in terms of new directions. Okay, you need both. You can't.
Yeah. Well, I also think clearly you're a leader in terms of having an understanding of international cultures.
A different understanding than most people, I would say. A different.
Yeah. And I wish you were leader in New Direction. I mean, Allon, I think of like Bush and Marshak, and who would, by the way, would absolutely disagree with what you said about doing a diagnosis. They considered anything that which they would call diagnostic OD as being a flawed approach. Uh, they want to enter the system and with no agenda, they say. And and a lot of people are buying this. I mean, I think it's deeply flawed.
Gil, do you know how I just read a book on diagnosis of disease in the Roman army.
Uh-huh.
So these physicians said if a soldier has hemorrhoids, okay, they should sit on an onion, okay, and this was common practice.
Okay.
Okay. Now, by the way, Gil, that didn't
work.
No, it didn't
Okay.
work.
Okay.
So these people can say whatever they want. Anyone today can say anything.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the standards thing. But these are the people who really are having a big voice in the, along with the appreciative inquiry stuff, which you and I experienced
a big voice
in Poland.
Doesn't mean that the voice is right. Okay.
I understand. You and I experienced that in Poland, where the whole conference was switched to an appreciative inquiry model, and all we could say was nice things as we helped people think about their dilemmas. And it was, for me at least, it was inane, if not, and torturous. But Allon, you helped me not behave myself, which I appreciate. You said though, okay, so if you're a New Direction, how would you describe the direction that you go?
Yeah, well, I would say that the New Direction that I would go is, and I thought about this. I would say, okay, what biases does the profession have, and do I have as a practitioner, which may impede my ability to enable change? Okay, that's where it starts, and by the way, that's where it ends. And I'll give you a very good example. Mr. A doesn't speak to Mr. B. Doesn't matter why. Okay, two Japanese folks, A and B, disagree, don't speak to one another, and they go through a middleman. And the middleman needs to be there all the time. And if they come together and they talk, a lot of differences are going to surface. Okay, and they're going to argue, and they want to avoid that, or they even don't even want to discuss it. Okay, I would say that most OD would say, let's find a way of getting these two people to sit down, to understand where they're coming from, and to work together in some form of cooperation that they reach an agreement either to mitigate or to take the time bomb and how would you call it in English, to diffuse the bomb. And what I would say, it's important to understand that in some cultures in the world, okay, if people show vocal disagreement, they will never talk again in their life, and they should go through a middleman. So what I'm saying is we need to recognize that most OD people would not accept that.
Sure. There's indirectness, especially with authority figures, also, I think, is really important in a lot of cultures.
That's one, the importance of conflict avoidance. Is I think we need to understand the authenticity. I want to deal with authenticity and diversity. First, I'll deal with diversity. Okay, this is very important. I was born as a Jew in a Catholic-speaking French country. Okay, that's where I was born. Okay. So I was a minority and a minority and a minority, and I went to Protestant schools. Okay, I never, ever thought that I had rights except the right for an education and earn money. I had no language rights. I had to learn French. I wanted to learn French. I didn't want the what do you call it? I didn't want Jewish holidays celebrated. Most people weren't Jewish. Most people weren't Protestant. They were French Catholic. I had no interest at all in asserting my individual rights in the public domain. None.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And so the importance of diversity in my age was I'm a minority, I need to adapt. Okay. So, and by the way, if you look at the Jews of Quebec who remain there, okay, they're French speaking, their kids are French speaking, some even speak French at home among themselves. They adapted.
Right.
And today, I think, had I grown up, I'm so glad I didn't grow up in the age of diversity in Quebec. I lived in a culture which said we are dominant. You know, you can ship up or shape out, or shape up or ship out. Okay, what imposing diversity on a French speaking entity in Canada which wants to impose, which feels threatened by the presence of English, that's legitimate. And certainly diversity, the only thing that diversity can do is end in civil war. Okay. So I look at diversity very, very differently today. Okay.
Hmm.
I look at diversity in terms of competence. You know, we just had a big military failure here. Okay. We have a lot of diversity. I don't know what caused it, but there's certainly more diversity than competence. Okay.
Hmm.
People don't talk about competence anymore. It's not important. You know, how many people do we have from what we call the periphery? These are, towns in the desert. How many men, how many women, how many goats, how many people, with no arms or no legs are serving, as drivers. Come on. It can drive you into the deep end.
You remind me, and this helps me understand the roots of some of my own thinking. But this Edwin Friedman, are you familiar with Friedman?
No.
Okay, well, he is a Jewish family systems therapist who was a student of Murray Bowen's, and maybe you're familiar with Bowen. Uh, but Friedman wrote a book about called "Failure of Nerve" about U.S. culture, where he basically said things like people are more concerned with their rights than their responsibilities. That the people who are most dysfunctional in the system, the rest of the system gets organized around and paralyzed by. Anyway, so that may or may not seem like a clear parallel to what you were just saying, but he certainly.
Didn't he write about the quick fix? He's the guy that
Yes,
wrote about quick fixes,
yes,
right? Yeah, okay, I've read
yes,
his work.
yeah. So that's he just thinks it's becoming a more and more anxious culture where people are constantly trying to not upset everybody else, and that ends up being what's controlling our our guiding principle is not, don't upset anybody,
Yeah.
and
You
that's
asked me
pathetic.
where OD is going, so I started on diversity. I'll give you another area. Look, we have technology has basically um, made us all much more lonelier. Okay, much more lonelier. We don't go to dinner parties. We use our cell phones, 6, 7 hours a day. We don't sit and they say in French bavarder. I would say in English, shoot the wind, or chew the cud or whatever. People avoid doing that in organizations. You can add to that working from home. Okay. Now, I think that in the West, there's this point of view which says, well, we need to adopt or adapt almost every change which comes our way and see what good there is in it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in many parts of the world, if you don't have trust, you can't do business. You can't do business. Okay. It's just absolutely impossible to do business if you're working remote or just writing someone. Can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that OD needs to recognize that. especially in huge countries where people don't trust anyone except who's in their inner circle. And in the inner circle in the States, we could be, well, I live in San Francisco, I studied at Yale, I'm from Boston. Okay. Okay, well, there's an inner circle there. But in huge countries, Russia, China, India, you trust your inner circle. Okay. OD design doesn't take that into account.
Uh,
I think part of the OD is like how to build trust in a virtual environment. That's very biased.
that makes sense to me, Alon, and I think, of course, if you grow up in like Russia, you're probably going to trust your kids as they grow more than you are going to trust strangers. Uh, we live in a, but I think trust is huge here too. So the idea that people are going to function together effectively without actually spending any time with each other is a mistake.
Totally. I think it's a. I think it's just. It could be. It could be that people who've never met can succeed, but it's rare.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm with manufacturing plant leaders, certainly one of the things I'm encouraging them to do is to spend as much time walking around the plant and talking to people as possible.
Yeah, this conversation, by the way, between you and I, would not have happened had we never met.
That is true. We actually met in person, and
That's right.
yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you were growing on me online.
Be careful. Be careful there, Gil.
Yeah,
Behave.
it's too late. It's too late. But it certainly would. That was really important part of our relationship.
Well, and on
But,
the list that we're both part of, like I know I met Pauline and
uh-huh.
John face to face, and we correspond all the time. I've
Yeah,
met
yeah,
I've met Terry, I've met Madeleine, and we correspond. Okay, and we keep in touch. If you don't have that, and by the way, everyone I mentioned is Western, okay, or Western origin, or comes from a Western country. But if you don't have that, I think in organizations, if you don't have the ability to sit down and talk face to face, I think organizational design will fail. And by the way, a lot of what happens in organizations today is constant passing the buck and delegating responsibility to a mindless um, software program which will make decisions. I'll give you an example. I need a spare part. Okay, I need 10 of them. And the purchasing guy who's never seen you, he may not know English, says, I don't care what you need. The MRP just allows me to buy you two, and I'm not going to go around the system because I don't want to get screwed. So you're not getting that spare part. That happens all the time. No one
yes,
cares.
yep. And certainly part of what I do when I'm allowed to do it is I bring the operators and the maintenance people and the parts people and those and the leadership people, and I bring them all together and have them figure out how to make it work better. So,
Yeah, and
uh,
walk another mile in the other guy's shoes. That
yep,
empathy is very, very important. Okay, you
yep.
asked, and one more point, you asked the whole question of authenticity. Okay, authenticity is a great driver of communication in OD. Well, what about people who think authenticity is like farting in public? Okay.
Alon, you might have to tell the joke you started with
No,
before we
no, no,
started
no, Gil,
recording.
you behave
Okay,
yourself.
okay. But for the context. But anyway, yes, keep
No,
going.
it's if I express my feelings, I know, for example,
Uh,
in Thailand, I worked for many years. If I express my feelings, I've lost control.
sure. Yep, you got to understand where you are and who you're with, and one size doesn't fit all. But even in the U.S. in the OD community, uh, it's possible to get thrown out if you authentically think something that other people are clinging to is stupid.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the authenticity, even amongst I value authenticity always with again, going back to Bowen and Friedman, always with the responsibility for not saying things that you don't want to say. I mean, it's not like authenticity means everybody should always say everything they think and everything they feel. That would be chaos.
Yeah. And also, I think that authenticity, uh, you need, like when you go into a society and you say, well, what can I say face to face and what should I say in closed doors and what should I think and not say? Same thing needs to happen in authenticity is you people need to say to themselves, how sensitive is this culture to me expressing myself? That's one.
Yes,
And then
sure.
two is don't change them. And that's my beef with OD is that these people have a low tolerance for authenticity. I need to give them authenticity training. That's where I go way, way off on my tangents.
Sure, you should. And what's worse is that if we go back to just a bunch of the people who believe that everyone should have authenticity, whatever that even means, and you tell them you think they're idiots in an authentic way, you think they're idiots, they'll just crucify you.
Would they crucify me? I don't
Sure.
think. Oh, I, but is that revenge, Gil? Is that an act of revenge? It's crucifying me.
Hey man, it happens. It happened to a lot of people a lot. It was a very popular thing, and it still is. It still is without the actual nails and all that. But that's just the hypocrisy of saying authenticity is the thing, and then not tolerating people telling you they think that you're wrong. Then, well, what is authenticity if there's
No, I
rules
agree.
about
No, I
what you can
totally
be
agree.
authentic about? I mean, anyway, that's OD is deeply confused. I think the profession, if you just count it by like number of people who are in it that are confused, which is sort
Yeah,
of disappointing. But
yeah.
anyway, Dad could never crack that one. He kept trying. I mean, he's here he is 95 and still with us, and throughout his life he's worked on people who thought consensus is better than somebody just making a decision, and everyone should always be involved in everything. And I mean, he's fought that fight since 1953 when he stepped into his first G group. You guys would enjoy each other. It's a shame you guys didn't get together physically. That doesn't seem very likely now.
Oh no, I think we have
Let's,
about 4 flights a day out of the country. It's impossible.
yeah, and he's not taking one, so you'd have to fly to Spokane, Washington. So, uh, anyway, well, look, Allon, this has been just the kind of conversation I hoped it would be. Hopefully, it seems uncensored. Uh, what like just any closing thoughts or any advice you would have for OD people?
Yeah, I think that OD people. I think that OD people should read philosophy and read history
Mm-hmm.
and read about um, what's it called? In areas of social science that
Mm-hmm.
uh, interface with our profession. I'm going to give Yalom as a very good example.
Mm-hmm.
Yalom, a brilliant psychiatrist, studied philosophy. Okay, and a lot of his thinking is guided by principles which he imported from philosophy. So I think we need to look, for example, at how could we as change agents look at successful changes How is that done? I'll give you two examples. With all the criticism that exists, South Africa has made tremendous nonviolent change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's look at Turkey from the time of the empire and what Ataturk did. Okay, he changed the language, the writing, he changed the spelling, he changed everything. Part of it has been undone, but only part of it. How can we learn about macro changes, okay, from history? What are the components there? If we can't change properly, who manages to change things properly? What can we learn from that? So that would be my final thought.
It's lovely, Allon, and I feel privileged to have this time with you. I'm thinking about what to call this. Do you know what a gadfly is?
Yes, I know.
Is that a term? If I called this an interview with an OD gadfly,
That's
uh,
fine. That's fine. Do you
okay.
know what? Do you remember "Stranger on the Shore" by Acker Bilk?
I do not.
It's a song. It's a very nice song. I'll send it to you when we finish. And he
Okay.
put it in an album, and he called it "Call Me Mister." So you can call it whatever you want. Okay.
Okay.
A gadfly is fine with me. Just don't
Yeah.
put in the joke that I told you at the beginning in what I in the recorded session.
It's a deal. I should blackmail you with that, but no, it's a deal.
Thank you,
Okay.
young
Well,
man, for having invited me.
well, thank you for giving us your time and your wisdom and your humor. And I sure hope things work out the way you want them to there
Thank you,
in
Gil. I
Israel.
appreciate it
Yeah.
very much.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Look, okay. Take care. That is it. That's a wrap. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you listening. This, again, is Gil Crosby. And I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. It's many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Again, the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day and invite you to.